Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my channel? Thank you so much. My name is Maya, and a few weeks ago my ex-husband's new wife told my daughter something so cruel, so personal, that it cracked the surface of everything I'd worked to rebuild after my divorce. She looked my daughter in the eye and said, "Your mom couldn't even keep a family together." My daughter is 11. She was just trying to enjoy a birthday party for her stepbrother, but instead, she heard a woman who barely knows her mother try to rewrite our entire story in one sentence. I didn't find out until after, and when I did, I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive straight to their house and demand an apology, but I didn't. I stayed quiet. I let it settle. I let my daughter decide how she wanted to handle it. At that next party, with a room full of kids and cupcakes and parents who had no idea what was coming, she picked up a fork, tapped a glass, and said, "Can I share what my dad texted my mom last night while lying next to you?" Everyone froze, and just like that, the party ended early. It's strange how silence can feel louder than words. After my divorce, that silence lived with me. It was in the mornings when I packed my daughter's lunch alone, in the nights when the other side of the bed stayed cold, and in the space between text messages that used to come in at all hours, now replaced by formal updates like, "I'll pick her up at 3. I'm 36. I work from home as a freelance writer, which sounds more flexible than it feels. I live in a small 2-bedroom townhouse just outside of Austin with my daughter Arya. She's 11, all heart and curiosity, with a sense of emotional radar I never had at that age. She's the kind of girl who hugs her friends longer than necessary and always asks me if I've eaten when she gets home from school. She didn't ask to grow up in a house without both parents, but she never once made me feel like I wasn't enough. Her dad, Daniel, and I were married for 12 years. We met in college, fell hard, married young, and tried to make life work as it came at us. The early years were good, messy but real. When Arya was born, something shifted. It wasn't overnight, but I felt him pulling away inch by inch. By year 10, we were more like co-workers than partners. By year 12, he told me he wasn't in love anymore. 3 months later, he moved out. 14 months after that, he was married again. Her name is Brooke. She's a lifestyle influencer with a perfect smile and a curated personality that photographs well. She met Daniel at his gym. I saw her Instagram long before I met her in person. Pale neutrals, minimalist quotes, carefully posed workout sets, the kind of woman who uses the word energy in every sentence and signs her captions with hearts. When I met her, she was exactly who I expected, polite in public but cold. She called me Maya like it was a task. She smiled with her lips, not her eyes, and she treated Arya like a guest rather than family. At first, I tried to stay optimistic. Co-parenting is hard, but I believed if we all prioritized Arya, it could work. I communicated clearly. I never missed a drop-off. I encouraged Arya to respect Brooke, even when it stung to watch her walk into another woman's house every other weekend. I kept my boundaries and swallowed my pride. But something shifted last fall. Arya started coming home quieter. She'd retreat to her room more. She stopped telling me stories about her weekends, which had once poured out of her in colorful detail. One evening, as we were unloading groceries, she said Brooke made a post and didn't tag me in the pictures, even though I was there. I asked if that bothered her. She shrugged, then said, "I just felt invisible." I wanted to reach out. I wanted to say something to Daniel, but I didn't. I knew how easily it could be spun into jealous ex-wife or overstepping boundaries. So I watched and waited, checking in gently with Arya, listening more than talking, and reminding her every day that she was loved, seen, and heard. The moment that broke the dam came on a rainy Sunday evening after Daniel dropped Arya off. She climbed into the car, her arms crossed, her backpack shoved under her feet. She didn't say a word. I asked how the weekend went. Still nothing. I waited. It wasn't until we got home and I was helping her with her jacket that she whispered, "Brooke told me you couldn't keep a family together." I froze for a moment. I couldn't even react. My throat tightened. I looked her in the eyes and said, "What did you say?" She repeated it, then added, "She said I was lucky I still get to see you." That night, I barely slept. My chest felt like it was on fire. I replayed every sacrifice, every compromise, every therapy session, every late-night cry, and every time I smiled through the pain to keep things stable for Arya. All of it dismissed by a woman who stepped in halfway through the story and decided she had the right to tell it differently. I didn't respond to Brooke. I didn't text Daniel. I hugged Arya tighter than I ever had. I told her none of what Brooke said was true. I reminded her that love isn't measured by who stays in a house, it's measured by who shows up when it matters most. I had no idea what was coming next, but my daughter did, and she was about to teach all of us a lesson in truth. After Arya told me what Brooke had said, I tried to stay calm for her sake more than mine. I didn't want my daughter to see me spiral, even though inside I was shaking with rage. I walked to the kitchen and started dinner like it was any other night. I stirred spaghetti sauce and chopped garlic with my mind racing, trying to decide if I should say something to Daniel or let it go. But this wasn't just a slip of the tongue. Brooke had looked my daughter in the eye and tried to make her feel ashamed of her own mother. That's not co-parenting, that's psychological warfare dressed in yoga pants and lip gloss. I talked to Arya that night and asked, "How did it make you feel when she said that?" She hesitated, then said, "It felt like I was supposed to choose between you and them." I kissed her forehead and told her, "You never have to choose. Your heart is big enough to love everyone, but no one has the right to shame you or me for what happened." The next morning, Arya was quiet. She stared at her cereal, then asked, "Why does she hate you so much?" I didn't know how to answer. I said, "Sometimes people feel threatened when they can't control the story, but the truth doesn't change just because someone else tries to rewrite it." I thought maybe things would calm down. Maybe Brooke had just had a bad day, or maybe she didn't think Arya would repeat what she heard. But 2 days later it happened again. Arya came home early from her visit, not even making it through the full weekend. She walked in, tossed her bag down, and went straight to her room. When I followed her in, she was curled up on her bed. I sat down beside her. She didn't even look at me. She said, "Brooke said you should be grateful that Dad still lets you be involved." I felt my stomach drop. That word, "lets," like I was being granted permission to raise my own child, like I was the footnote in a story that I wrote with blood, sweat, and every ounce of strength I had left after the divorce. I texted Daniel, short director, "Can we talk?" He replied, "I'm busy, can it wait?" I didn't respond. I knew that door wasn't going to open unless he felt like walking through it, and I wasn't about to beg. Later that week, just after midnight, I got a text from him out of nowhere. I was in bed, half asleep, and my phone buzzed on the nightstand. He wrote, "I miss how we used to laugh. You were always real with me. Brooke is just filters and walls." I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't answer. I took a screenshot and saved it. I didn't want the words, but I needed the proof. The next morning, Arya saw the message. I hadn't even realized I'd left my phone open. She walked into the kitchen holding it and asked, "Did he mean it?" I looked her in the eyes and said, "It doesn't matter. What matters is that we don't let people lie to us about who we are." She nodded, but she was already thinking about something. I could see it in the way her face changed, the way her jaw clenched slightly like it did when she was preparing to answer a hard question in class. She didn't say much that day, but she started watching me more closely, noticing things. How I double-checked her homework, how I packed extra snacks in her bag, how I hugged her longer when she looked tired. The next weekend was Brooke's son Braden's birthday party. He was turning 8. They invited Arya, and to my surprise, she wanted to go. She said it like a decision, not a request. "I'm going," she told me. "I want to see something." I looked at her, studying her face. She wasn't angry, she was calm. She had made up her mind. I asked, "Are you sure?" She nodded yes. I dropped her off at their house on Saturday afternoon. As she walked up the driveway, surrounded by balloons and loud music, cameras capturing every second, she didn't look back once she walked through that front door like she belonged there, but she carried something with her that they weren't expecting. She had heard everything they said and she wasn't going to stay quiet. Saturday morning felt heavier than most. Arya was already up when I came downstairs. She had dressed herself, combed her hair, and was zipping up her hoodie with a strange calmness in her eyes. She ate her breakfast without a word, no humming, no silly jokes, none of the quiet chatter she usually filled the room with. Just quiet focus. I was the one with nerves. Every part of me wanted to tell her she didn't have to go. I wanted to say, "Forget it, let's do our own thing today. Just us." But I also knew something deeper was happening inside her. This wasn't a girl being dragged into drama. This was a girl walking into it with her head up. "You sure you want to go?" I asked, watching her lace up her sneakers. She looked up at me and nodded. "I need to." I didn't push. I didn't try to protect her with warnings or advice. She already knew what this was. It wasn't about revenge or attention, it was about being heard, and she had spent enough time being quiet. The party was at Daniel and Brooke's house, suburban, 2-story, white siding, everything always picture perfect. They had gone all out for Braden's 8th birthday. There were rental tents in the backyard, a bounce house, a balloon arch the size of a car, and even a little cotton candy machine spinning away in the corner. Music blasted from speakers. People I didn't know were already posing for photos. I pulled up to the curb, and Arya opened the car door without hesitation. You want me to come in? I offered. No, I'll text you when I'm ready. She shut the door gently and walked up the driveway with her gift tucked under one arm. I watched her until she disappeared through the front door, swallowed by the crowd. Back home, I couldn't focus. I tried reading, then cleaning, then scrolling through my phone, but my mind kept going back to that morning, to her face, to the determination in her voice. 2 hours passed, then 3. I kept checking my phone, waiting for the message that she wanted to be picked up. Then just after 3 p.m., my phone lit up, not with a message from her, but with one from another parent. Hey, just checking in. Everything okay? We had to leave the party early. There was kind of a scene. My stomach dropped. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Arya. Can you come now? I drove faster than I should have. When I pulled up, she was already outside, sitting on the front steps with her jacket on and her party favor bag at her feet. Her eyes were clear, her posture was relaxed. She looked like someone who had finished what they came to do. She climbed into the car and buckled her seatbelt. I looked over at her, waiting for her to speak. She didn't right away. She just sat quietly for a few moments. Then she said, I to the truth. I didn't ask what she meant, not yet. I knew she would tell me when she was ready, but something had changed, something significant. The strange thing was, she didn't seem shaken or scared. She looked lighter that evening as she helped me set the table for dinner. She finally explained they were doing this thing where all the kids had to say something nice about Brayden in front of everyone, like a memory or compliment, she said. I nodded, and after it got quiet, I stood up and said, I wanted to share something too. She paused. I said, can I tell you all what my dad texted my mom last night while he was lying next to Brooke? I froze mid-step. She continued, nobody said anything, it was like everything stopped. She told me that Daniel tried to interrupt, but she kept going. She read the text from his phone that he had sent me word for word out loud to everyone. I miss how we used to laugh. You were always real, Brooks just filters and walls. My mouth went dry. You did that? I asked. She nodded. I wanted them to know what kind of man he really is and what kind of woman she really is for trying to tear you down. I didn't know what to say. I just looked at her, my daughter, 11 years old, braver than most adults I've ever met. That moment, her decision to speak, her refusal to be silent, changed everything. It wasn't just about me, it was about her voice, her story, and the truth she chose to defend. She didn't yell, she didn't cry, she didn't need to. She just told the truth. The party was already in full swing when Arya arrived. The music was loud, the decorations were excessive, and Brooke was in her element. She wore a pastel dress, moving from one group of parents to another like a hostess at a luxury event. A photographer wandered around, snapping candid shots for what would later be a carousel of perfect Instagram memories. To everyone else, it was just a kid's party, but to Arya it was something else entirely. It was a stage. Arya greeted a few kids she recognized, handed Brayden his gift, and took her place at a table near the back. She watched everything. She didn't talk much. She didn't laugh. She waited. About an hour in, Brooke called everyone's attention to the front yard where a few kids were invited to say something kind about Brayden. Let's all take a moment to say something sweet about the birthday boy, she said with a wide smile. Parents clapped, cameras came out, and a few kids stepped forward and said things like, he's good at soccer, or he always shares his snacks. Then the room quieted. People were starting to drift back to the food when Arya stood up, walked over to the nearest table, picked up a fork, and gently tapped it against a glass. The soft chime rang out louder than expected in the sudden lull. Everyone turned to her. She stepped onto a chair, cleared her throat, and said in a clear, steady voice, can I share something too? There was a short silence, and Brooke smiled tightly. It was like she was going to gently guide Arya back down, but Arya didn't move. She said, I just want to tell you all what my dad texted my mom last night while lying in bed next to Brooke. The words hit the air like a dropped plate. The party stopped, no music, no chatter. Even the cotton candy machine whirred into silence. All eyes were on her. Arya reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out a printed copy of the screenshot. She unfolded it with both hands and read it aloud, not loudly but clearly enough for the room to hear. I miss how we used to laugh. You were always real, Brooks just filters and walls. Gasps echoed across the backyard. One of the moms dropped her drink, and a few kids just stood in confusion, but the adults knew exactly what they had just heard. Brooke froze, her hands still awkwardly suspended in the air. Her smile was gone, her mouth parted slightly, but no words came out. Daniel, who had been talking to a few dads near the grill, turned around slowly and stared at Arya with wide eyes. He looked like someone had yanked the floor out from under him. Before anyone could speak, Arya turned to Daniel and added, "Don't text Mom like that if you're going to let your wife lie about her to me." Silence. Then someone whispered, "Is she serious?" Another voice asked, "Was that real?" And just like that, the atmosphere shifted. Brooke's carefully crafted world began to crack. Daniel opened his mouth like he was going to respond, but he didn't. He just stood there blinking, caught between damage control and complete humiliation. Brooke finally spoke, but her voice wavered. "That's not appropriate. This is a child's party." Arya didn't flinch. Neither is telling a child that her mom failed at keeping a family together. A few parents stepped away. Someone took their kid by the hand and left. The photographer packed up his camera and walked to his car without saying a word. One of the moms muttered something about not wanting to be part of this drama and followed. The party deflated in minutes. No more music, no more cake, no more photos. Brooke walked into the house without saying anything. Daniel followed her, then turned back briefly, meeting Arya's eyes. She held his gaze, firm and calm. He dropped his eyes. Arya walked back to the front yard, texted me, and waited on the steps like nothing had happened. But everything had. By the time I arrived, the guests were already leaving. Some looked confused, others just looked uncomfortable. But Arya looked peaceful. She had used her voice not to embarrass someone but to defend the truth. She hadn't lashed out. She had spoken clearly, simply, and honestly. And in doing so, she shattered a lie that had been following both of us for years. That was the moment everything changed, not just for Brooke, not just for Daniel, but for me. Because my daughter didn't just defend me, she freed me. When we got home from the party, Arya kicked off her shoes like it was any other Saturday. She hung her hood. Ai on the hook washed her hands and wandered into the kitchen to grab a juice box. Not a single trace of guilt or regret crossed her face. She was calm, steady, grounded in what she had done. I stood there watching her, still stunned, not by what she said but by how confidently she had said it. There was no cruelty in her delivery. She hadn't tried to shame anyone or turn it into a performance. She had spoken the truth in the one place it was being constantly twisted. Later that night, after dinner, we sat on the back porch. The sky was that quiet pink you only get in early spring. Arya leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a few moments we just listened to the wind. Then she asked, "Did I make it worse?" I turned to her and shook my head. "No, you made it real. You spoke the truth when no one else would." She looked relieved, but there was still something in her eyes. I asked, "Why now? Why at the party?" She answered without hesitation, "Because she said what she said to hurt you, and no one said anything, not even Dad." I waited for someone to speak up and no one did, so I did. I reached over and took her hand. "You shouldn't have had to," I said. "I know," she said, "but I'm glad I did." That's the part that hit me the hardest. She didn't do it for revenge. She didn't do it to get attention or stir drama. She did it because she knew silence would be more painful than anything else. She saw a lie and she refused to let it live one more day. In the days after the party, there was fallout. Brooke blocked me on every platform. She deleted several of her curated posts from that day. She made a vague story post about protecting your peace and removing toxic energy, but the likes and comments were down. People weren't buying it. Daniel didn't reach out immediately, but eventually he sent a message. I didn't know she'd say that. "I didn't mean for this to happen." I replied once, "She's your daughter." She didn't break anything, she just stopped pretending. He never responded again. Word got around. A few moms texted me to say they were proud of Arya. One even said, "I wish I had that kind of courage when I was her age." I did too. I had spent so much time trying to keep the peace, to stay polite, to avoid being the angry ex-wife. In that space, I let too many people walk over the truth. Arya reminded me that silence doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it just makes people believe they can say whatever they want without consequence. In the weeks that followed, our home felt lighter. Arya started talking more, laughing more, drawing again. The distance that had been growing between us started shrinking. I think she finally believed I wasn't ashamed of our story, that I wasn't hiding from it. I had just been waiting for the right moment to stop surviving and start living. Sometimes I think back to that day and wonder what would have happened if she had stayed quiet, if she had swallowed the insult like I did so many times. Would Brooke still be planting poison in her ear? Would Daniel still be sending late-night texts like I was a secret? Would Arya still be walking through her days wondering which version of the truth to believe? I'm grateful I never had to find out. I didn't raise a perfect child, I raised a brave one. The kind who knows that love and honesty belong in the same room. The kind who knows that a mother's worth isn't defined by the version of the story someone else decides to tell. And the next time someone tries to shame her for where she comes from, I know exactly what she'll do. She'll look them in the eye, she'll speak clearly, and she won't flinch. Because when the truth finally speaks, it doesn't whisper, it rings like a fork on a glass at a party no one will ever forget. If this story hit home for you, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself while someone else tried to tear you down, you're not alone. And if you're a parent doing your best in the middle of chaos, I hope this reminded you that your strength speaks louder than any lie ever could. If you felt something while listening, please give this video a like. It helps more people hear stories that matter. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that truth always finds its voice. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What would you have done in my daughter's place? What would you say to someone who tried to rewrite your story? And if you want more real stories like this about family, resilience, and learning to stand tall again, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. This is a space for truth, not perfection. Thanks for watching. I'm Maya, and this was our